Hello, welcome to Precontation Points Video Snark. I read books and talk about what went wrong. I'm continuing my read-through of Alienated by Melissa Landers. Not the first video, go check out the others. Links are posted below. Chapter 13. Friendship is one mind and two bodies. Right, until your BFF went out of her mind and after your ex-boyfriend's body. Is that what's really bothering Kara, how Tori is dating Eric now? Or is it the casual racism in joining a hate group? Kara mopes around about the loss of her friend, although at least she admits that it hasn't been a full day. She also decides that she doesn't care anymore and doesn't bother to change out of her sweatshirt or even wash her face or comb her hair. Girl, please, at least wash your face. Helix comes in and asks if they should skip school today, or at least go in late to avoid the protesters. When she refuses, he pointedly says that maybe it's time that he left, and he tells her that he heard her last night. Kara says that he can't leave because she wants to see his planet, that he'd promised her some of that flatbread there. He probably felt responsible for what had happened, especially after listening to her cry all night. To be fair, it's probably for the best that terrible people like Eric and Tori share their true colors. Like, yeah, finding out this way really stinks, but as I keep saying, Kara needs to make better friends, because those two do not pass a vibe check. Come on, I'll let you escort me to my very first shunning. That earned a half smile from him. I think this means I'm a woman now. And me with no gift for the occasion. Another joke. He changed in the last couple of months. I'm okay with showing Elix letting his experiences on Earth change him in some way, but the problem is that this book barely took the time to establish him as a character. Did he change? Is Elix cracking jokes unusual? We don't know, because the narration never bothered to show us any of that. Kara randomly decides that from the 2-second conversation that she can't let anybody see her like this, that is to say, unkempt, but Elix says that he likes it, which of course he does because she's wearing gray. He then goes on to comment about her freckles, because of course the author has to squeeze in some anti-makeup rhetoric too. Anything else you'd like to stuff into this already full story? Got plenty of room for some homophobia or transphobia? Elix touches her eyelashes randomly, which makes Kara feel things. Ugh. As much as I hate it, at least this is showing way more feelings for Elix than the narration is bothered to show in the opposite direction. Sure, it keeps saying that he's got feelings for her, but it's not bothering to show any of that. On the way to school, Kara begs Elix to tell her about the animals on his planet. He tells her about the dorm pet, which he likens to something along the lines of a lemur, but then he literally describes as a monkey instead. No, I don't follow any of that, but whatever. He says that thanks to the controlled climate, all animals have adopted a peach-like fuzz. He then offers to try and draw Kara a picture of one, but warns that he's not an amazing artist. And the reason why there are no photographs of this creature is because, no, seriously, the math isn't adding up here. Kara makes a joke about how he's finally got good at something. He says that when children are around 6 years old, they're given an aptitude test to try and find out what their job should be. And geez, I thought that demanding that 18-year-olds should know what they want to do for the next 30 years was rough. Alex tested into the translator field, but as he got older he realized that he had more of a passion for science than for social work and tried to appeal the decision with the elders. Okay, so you could theoretically change it. However, the elders refused, saying that his scores weren't good enough to justify moving him to a new field, and they're basing it off from a test he took when he was literally 6 years old. Also, this is the first time I've heard Elix say anything remotely negative about his people. However, Elix was so angry following their terrible decision that he refused to go to classes. This resulted in him being punished by being whipped with an electric paddle and denied food for the rest of the day. Pardon my French, but what the can you imagine whipping somebody every time that they wanted to switch majors or drop out of class? No Spanish for you, only German. I'd also like to take a brief time out to say something else on this subject. I know that I've been pretty much on Team Alien this entire time, mainly because from where Alex is coming from, he talks about wars and racism and pollution, but the first time he brings up something negative about his people, and he talks about how he was literally physically beaten for wanting to follow his passion. I know that it's tough to get out of from an abusive situation when you not only don't know that this kind of behavior isn't normal, but also practiced by everybody around your planet. But still, I think that Alex's stay on Earth should be eye-opening in more ways than he was expecting. That it's not normal to beat somebody simply because they want to follow their dreams. Anyway, Alex mentions how he and Cyrene became friends after he was beaten the first time, and when the three of them were selected for the exchange, they all shared a room together in preparation for the journey. He says that Iran is another translator, but Cyrene is something called an emotional healer. He says that Cyrene is his best friend, which makes Kara feel rather jealous. Uh-huh. In the school parking lot, there are the usual protesters. Kara and Alex make a joke about how they're clearly not ignoring them, like Marcus had threatened. The military are here now to hold the protesters back. Too bad that they couldn't contain the cigarette butts, discarded leaflets, and cardboard coffee cups that blew around the parking lot like tumbleweeds. Does the author not know about litter laws? Start charging the entire group for every cigarette butt, leaflet, and coffee cup. Kara starts to look for Tori's car and then physically stops herself. Alex grabs her hand, although she insists that he doesn't have to. He says that it brings him an odd sense of comfort and that it was insanely upsetting listening to her crying all night. As they get closer to the protesters, somebody sets off an air horn and everybody simultaneously turns their back on Kara. Good, now nobody has to look at their ugly mugs. They go inside where most people part, and I quote, like the Red Sea. Kara knows that her clinging to Alex is going to spark rumors, but she eventually decides that she doesn't care, that right now Alex is her only friend. But right as she thinks that, Kara sees one of those Alienated girls hanging around her locker. The girl had stopped dyeing her hair but not using bad self-tanner. I can only imagine that the poor girl looks miserable. The girl introduces herself as Ashley and thinks that she's the only one left right now. Apparently, no matter what some of them might think about the aliens, the hate and pressure from Halo made them quit the fan club. Kara invites her to debate club after school, saying that Ashley clearly has moxie. After Ashley leaves, somebody chucks a piece of paper at them, which is basically threatening them. Kara recognizes the name it's signed off on as one of her blog trolls who'd been asking about alien weapons. Kara thinks that it's odd how the person who'd written the note pressed the pen so hard into the paper that it practically ripped it in places. The note mentioned a cop, which is confusing to Kara. Alex points to the school security officer, who Kara recognizes as having been a classmate of Troy's. Kara has a note from him, since the last thing she needs is a police escort. But that does little good, and the officer says that somebody called in a threat, so now the two of them will be getting an escort anyway. Alex tells Officer Blake that Kara's been getting threatening notes and shows him the note they received a moment earlier. Kara explains about the traitorous B-word note that she got the other day. Later, Kara pats herself in the back for having invited Ashley to the debate team, mainly because Kara is so off her game. She thinks about how some of her teachers are starting to show their racist colors, granted not as openly as her peers, but in more subtle ways, like conveniently forgetting to write her college recommendation letters. Screwdriver them, then. Since she knows she's not going to, and I quote, convince a pig to roll in mud, she decides to write her next blog post. This one is about a bill to remove the aliens, and she calls those government officials out on their racist behavior. She goes on to say that people are accusing the aliens of destroying random crops of soy, wheat, and grapes, which readers know is 100% the truth, but nobody else does. However, she points out, these aliens have so much more power than Earth does. If they wanted for us to suffer, why destroy random crops? Which is an insanely good point to make. However, she feels frustrated with what she wrote and decides that her fans know how to contact the local government, which, yes, people do know how to get in touch with their government officials, but the problem is that's literally what a call to arms is about, a pep talk to get people amped about issues, a reminder that they should care about stuff like this, and here's the number anyway. But Kara decides to quit her day anyway. She tells the rest of the debate team she thinks that she's coming down with one of those 24-hour bugs and she's going to head out. Ashley is the only one who seems to care about this. Chapter 14. Alex feels bad for Kara, and unknown amount of time later, she's completely despondent and he barely saw her during the free time. He randomly shrugs and goes back to studying the water samples he took, but as he studies them, he finds something growing in the water, something that shouldn't be there. Moss. Kara turns on her stereo really loudly and starts to play depressing music. Alex decides that enough is enough, so he goes and makes a chocolate ice cream monstrosity to try and cheer her up. But even the, and I quote, bowl of diabetes isn't enough to pull her from her funk, nor the offer for her to beat him at a video game. Alex wants to help her, but he doesn't know what else to say or do to help cheer her up, so he goes back to his room. In his room, he pulls out the computer he'd been given and deletes a bunch of emails from Brandy, whom I'd like to remind you hasn't been heard from since, yet despite her obvious interest in Alex, Kara remarked that Brandy was dating Marcus. It doesn't add up, but whatever, the narration doesn't care, and neither should I. He starts to type in how to in the search bar and is baffled with the autocomplete suggestions of make love, followed by boil an egg. He isn't sure what he is looking for and gets rather distracted, going down an information rabbit hole about how to kiss. Of all the students avoiding her, the only one who mattered was Tori, who looked almost as miserable as she was. Well, if it isn't the consequences of your actions. Anyway, we jump over to Kara as she mopes in bed. Like, I get it. Terrible people being terrible and your life stinks. Get out of bed and stop wearing week-old potato chips. Elix comes in and bribes her with an unknown something to get her out of bed. Curiosity does the trick, and once she's out, he gives her the drawing of his dorm pet that he'd promised her earlier. Kara is taken aback by the highly detailed drawing and complains that he said that he wasn't good at art. He says that he couldn't get Vero's face right. He then says that he did some research, and for a moment I thought that he was going to assault her, but he doesn't, and instead insists that she put her shoes on. He takes her to a gym that's closed for renovations and uses an alien device to pick the lock and get them inside. He gives her some boxing gloves and encourages her to take her frustrations out on him. And I get it, but this entire scene goes on for way too long. She eventually starts wailing on a punching bag and feels a lot better. Later, the two of them has their Wednesday interviews. As the makeup artist puts lipstick on Kara, Elix can't help but think of the things that he'd learned on the internet. Probably good that he didn't stumble into the other darker parts of the internet, isn't it? It's bad enough that Elix has an intense physical reaction towards the thought of simply kissing Kara, if you catch my meaning. Also, the so-called journalist Sharon, who has been interviewing them, is still every bit as shirty and judgmental as ever. Elix feels a little uncomfortable when she tells them that they're going to be answering questions from the viewers at home, but warns them that they're going to be uncomfortable. Like, I get that junk like that is good for ratings, but if Leap is so desperate to convince the public that the aliens are good and that they should like them, then you think that they would pick better questions. Elix randomly thinks about going home but taking Kara with him. That makes him think of how people would respond to something like that. The first question is how Elix feels about that get rid of the aliens bill. He responds and says that Halo's voice might be the loudest, but they're in the minority. Kara gets angry over the entire thing and compares the bill to Jim Crow laws. Sharon randomly asks Kara about how Tori and Eric had both left her. Ah yes, why not ask the girl about her relationships or the boy about political issues? Do you want to ask Kara what brand of shoes she's wearing next? But Kara says that her friends leaving her have proven exactly who her real friends are. Sharon goes on and asks Elix why he thinks the humans have had such a bad reaction. He talks about the fear of the unknown and even quotes a Bible passage about they know not what they do. The next question is about the dying crops. Elix is like, why would I know anything about that? Next question. Sharon tries to press the issue, but Kara complains that not everything is some huge conspiracy. Please go touch grass. And although it's not quite as bad as asking Kara who she's wearing, Sharon points out how close Kara and Elix seem, which is only reducing Kara to her relationship with a man and not for literally anything else in her life, including all of the hard work she did simply to be considered for the program. But as Kara says what a great friend Elix is, he suddenly feels lower than dirt because she's sticking her neck out for him and he's doing whatever it is that he's doing. Chapter 15. The chapter opens on another blog post from Kara. She writes about the vile hate her family has been receiving, including her mom's car constantly being keyed and how Kara's picture hangs up in stores along with those jerks who write bad checks. But she cuts off in the middle of a sentence to ask for Ashley's opinion about it. Ashley suggests rallying the troops to remove the harmful anti-alien bill, but the two of them eventually settle on Let Awareness Day, where they hope to burst some harmful lies about the aliens. She also encourages Ashley to interview Elix, which is where the book lost me because I don't know if Ashley has a blog or YouTube channel or what. Ashley leaves at Kara's urging to go find Elix in the library, but comes back too soon, saying she couldn't find him in the library nor the school's computer lab. Meanwhile, Elix asks Aaron about the water results he collected in China. Aaron says he never looked into the water further since it was stupid polluted anyway, but upon Elix's urging, Aaron takes a closer look and is surprised to find moss growing in his water sample too. They talk about sending some of it up the chain of command to find out what's really going on with the water. Aaron says that he's going to uproot the plant that's causing everything to die, and Elix doesn't say it out loud, but he thinks about doing the same thing, mainly because of Kara. But despite thinking this, Elix then turns around and tells Aaron that humans are destroying the world. Some moss in the water isn't proof that everything is magically okay. Aaron then flushes the sample in the toilet to hide the evidence and talks about the people coming to their planet. It seems as though this is not so much about stopping the human-alien relationship as it is stopping the humans from going to their planet and destroying the same way that they're destroying Earth. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've already read all of my main Snarks, then you can find even more Snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr Snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snarks so much that you want me to Snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just 1 cent per word. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and now 2 full-length novels. I also sometimes run flash sales on my stores, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering more things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!